I may have to do your class. I have requested a showing for 1:30 today.
Okay,
As soon as it is actually approved, I can text Josh and let him know if you want.
perfect.
And then, for our listing, Mark has requested a showing for the inspection.
Okay,
Let me look at the date.
I did ask him to do it in the afternoon.
He did. He asked for it. What's the date? Oh, 4/21. What's that? Today's the 18th, so it's like Sunday
Friday.
from 2 to 3.
Well, it'll take longer than that.
Exactly.
I would
That's-
just call Karen and verify that that works for her.
Okay. Starting at 2.
Yeah, and I think I've already advised her that it's gonna be a 3-hour expedition, so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Was
All
it
right.
you that had the potential coming up listing that's a condo in Lakewood for like 4 or something like that, or 2 something?
Yeah,
We've got the
it's-
one at 260.
260 in Littleton.
Will you send me the info on that?
Yes,
What,
I'll give you the address.
Yes.
Because we just closed on it. 6705 Southfield,
Okay.
822.
Okay.
He's done some things to it since he closed on it a month ago, but
He updated like just.
He
like,
repainted
counters,
it.
the paint and the
he
flooring
cleaned it up.
stuff and, just basic. And some basic maintenance stuff that they didn't do, so. That he took care of.
He
so.
avoided the water leaks.
Yeah, he was concerned about
2-8, what'd she say the unit?
822. 6705 Southfield, number 822, yeah. So you can see the other pictures from when he bought it probably, but yeah, he's updated it since then, so. Okay. And it doesn't have the weird ladder in the middle of the dining room.
No, they removed the ladder. Oh, they fixed some of the electrical so it won't catch on fire.
Now, what's a plus?
Yeah,
That's a plus,
well, that's
right?
why we got it at such a bargain price.
Yeah, right. Okay. See you later. Are you all right? I'm from on Zoom.
I am right now. I'm feeling I will be.
Well, that would just put some time back in your day.
That's how I got that half hour back.
Yeah, well.
Hi, Serena.
Hello, hello. How are you?
It's Margaret. I'm gonna turn the video so you can see me just in case it's gonna be just the two of us. That's Stacy waving.
Hello.
Hi.
Anybody else join?
Let's see if anybody else is gonna join us. Let me email to you. Oops, come here. Ooh, it's hot in here. Serena, what's your email address?
It is Serena Terrell at kw.com. So SERRINATIRRELL.
At KW?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to spell it like Terrell Davis.
Right.
I mean, who wouldn't, right? So how's it going getting started?
Rough. I'm just kind of, I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do, where I want to invest, how I want to do it. So just kind of joining some classes and just trying to feel a little bit more confident in what I'm doing.
Yep. Yep. Well, I mean, the key to that is just diving in because you've got such an amazing support system around you with, the leadership team in the market center and, coaching, and you've just got a lot of support around you. So my first thing that I would do, have you gotten your little box from the office yet?
I did, yes.
Okay, so one of my favorite things to announce for a new agent is to take a picture of that little box that's got your business cards and your name badge in it and set it up if you're really creative in some cute, creative way. Snap a picture of it, post it on your social media. And as I tell people all the time, my post caption would say, shit just got real. But you know, you can say things like, wow, here we go, or I got there and here we, you know, just have some fun with it. You will be amazed at the amount of engagement you will get on a social media post like that. So it gets people knowing you're in the business. That and changing your name, changing your job on your social media to the fact that you're a realtor at Keller Williams Avenues.
Okay.
There's Margaret's tips for the day.
I love it. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Did you get your email from me?
Let me check. Nothing yet.
Oh, it's still sitting in the outbox. All right, that's okay. We'll do it this way. We're going to share my screen anyway, which you can already see. All right, so here we go, friends. All right, so in today's class, we're going to be talking about clauses that we can use in the contracts. And we are very blessed that our attorney, Damian Cox, has written a lot of clauses for us. And so what I have provided to you is the actual download of the various clauses that Damian has sent us. Now, when you're in, for those of you that use CTM, how do you use them and how do you find them? So if you're in a contract, let's just pretend I'm in a contract to buy and sell. And I want to put in a clause in any of these places. So we'll just pick water certificates because it's right here. Normally wouldn't have one there, but in case you would, you click on clauses and you'll notice that he's got them tagged. He's got, these are ones that you would typically use and amend. These are ones you would typically use CBS, contract to buy and sell, email correspondence, ERB, exclusive right to buy, LS, listing agreements. And then you can also see some of these have my initials on them. You can actually write your own clauses because not every clause that Damian has given us will fit. So let's pretend that I just want to put in, oh, I don't know. Let's do a appraisal gap coverage. I would click the one I want. I hit insert and it automatically will populate it into the contract. So that's how you can easily do this. And the number one phone call I get as a coach is, how do I write a clause? You'll also note that sometimes Damian will put warnings in here. This is for you. Sometimes he tells you how to fill it out. Sometimes he says, hey, just make sure you've thought about that. If I was actually doing this in a contract, I would remove that part. Okay? Questions on that? You probably really won't remember that until you're actually in it. But at that time, you'll go, oh, yeah, I remember when she taught us how to do that. So today, we're just going to go through all of these. I'm trying to figure out how to get my view on Word to be the way I want it to be. I don't want, maybe I just stick it in edit mode. I don't know. I'm not very good at technology. Oh, that was worse. There we go. It is what it is. Okay, so hopefully y'all can see my screen. So the first one is a clause that you would use in an amend extend. And actually, we do not need this button anymore because this one has been replaced by a form. So I actually can pull that one out. So we'll just skip that one. How's that? All right, contract to buy and sell. This is probably the document that I see the highest number of clauses being written. and we will probably spend the most amount of time here. The 1031 exchange clause, again, they've replaced that with a document, so clearly I'm using an old version of this. Assignment. This is when you are assigning the contract from the original party who bought it to someone else. So this contract is assignable by buyer to an entity wholly owned or controlled by buyer on or before closing. And then 2.2 is amended accordingly. So if you had a situation where the buyer bought the property in their personal name, and then right before closing says, oh, you know what, I want to put that in my company LLC. Flippers do this all the time. Then they can change the contract to be in the name of their LLC. So that's when you would use the assignment one. Attorney review. The buyer shall have the right to terminate this contract if buyer's attorney does not approve the terms and conditions of this contract on or before, insert date. If seller does not receive buyer's notice to terminate on or before the attorney approval deadline, then this contingency is deemed waived by buyer. So you'll notice that he puts in parentheses attorney approval deadline. Not only would you put this clause in the additional provisions of the contract to buy and sell, but up in the dates and deadlines, you would actually create an attorney approval deadline date. Why would you do this? Well, most of my clients' real estate attorneys aren't available on Saturdays and Sundays to review contracts. And in the event you have a buyer who is nervous and wants their attorney to review every single document, this allows you to get the offer in before the deadline, and yet gives your client the opportunity to have their attorney review it. Okay. Backup contract. When do we use this one? So your buyer is in love with a property, and this is a great strategy, you guys. Like, especially in the market when we start seeing buyers are going crazy, and then we're starting to see them walk away or pull out because they have buyer's remorse. This is a great contract if you have a client who came in second place or even third place. A backup contract says, we know you're under contract with somebody else. In the event that that contract falls apart and you accept my backup offer, we automatically become the new buyer, and that property never goes back on the market. This is a great strategy with buyers. The hard part about this is that technically buyers shouldn't be looking for another property in the event that their backup offer is accepted, which is why there's a termination date in this. We have used this in our business, and we have gotten buyers under contract using this. It also is great leverage if you're the selling agent to have a backup offer, because if you get in a situation where the buyer that you accepted their offer first starts to get a little wonky, you know you have a backup offer. You absolutely can use that as leverage as you're thinking through how you want to handle certain negotiations. Because as a seller, we can't technically terminate the contract. So the backup contract says seller is currently under contract to sell the property to another buyer, and that's known as first contract, by that, which is why that's in parentheses and in quotes. This contract is contingent upon the termination of the first contract in writing. Upon termination or cancellation of the first contract, seller will notify buyer in writing within 24 hours of such termination or cancellation, and this contingency will be deemed removed, and this contract will be in full force and effect. If, however, the first contract is not terminated or canceled on or before a date, this contract automatically terminates, and the earnest money will be returned to the buyer. So I'm going to pause going over that. So I never have my backup buyer turn in earnest money, so I remove the last part of that sentence. The part about having a date is that you don't want your buyer on the sidelines for 30 to 45 days. And it puts some pressure on the seller that if things are going wonky with the first contract, they may not want to lose my backup, and it gets them to move a little bit faster. We typically will put, depends on the property, we've put as little as 7 days, 5 days. We've put up to 15 just to see what happens with inspection. After that, I don't want to sit on the sidelines. Seller has the right to extend or amend the terms and conditions of the first contract without first obtaining permission from buyer. Additionally, seller's obligation to notify buyer of termination or cancellation of the first contract may be extended in the event of a dispute with the buyer on the first contract, which means that they can still negotiate the second to the last one. They have the right to extend or amend. They can still work with that buyer as if they didn't have a backup. Now, the second half of this clause is those instruction pieces. Okay, so the first sentence says use TFC in the dates and deadlines table instead of MEC or a specific date, and also use this clause. So you're only going to delete the first sentence. The term TFC means termination of first contract and is the date upon which the first contract is terminated and the buyer receives written notice that the above contingency has been removed and this contract is in full force and effect. Means they've terminated contract one, you are now the buyer of record. So when you're writing your backup offer up in the dates and deadlines section of the contract, many times we write hard dates or we do MEC plus X number of days. If you're doing a backup, you need to do TFC, which means the termination of first contract, because the dates don't start until that first contract is terminated. Margaret's pro tip is if you have a buyer who's in backup and you do get moved up to first position, I would create then an amend extend to put hard dates in so that you're not running the risk of a bunch of dates falling on weekends and trying to manage, okay, TFC plus 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but that's a Sunday. So now that becomes Monday. Like go through, spend some quality time putting the hard dates in and do an amend so that both you and the listing agent are on the same page. Questions or thoughts? Hello, KP.
Hello there.
I am sending you my document
Oh,
in
thanks.
case you
Hey,
want
I
to take notes.
I do have a comment. Sometimes this can be an somewhat antagonistic contract for the buyer if they consider the price to have increased in this time, maybe not right this minute, but maybe. So I put an amend, not an amend. In the additional provisions, I put that TFC will be removed and the date of the termination will replace that so that all of the dates become legit, just in case it's not a great working relationship. You can always, amend further down the line or something, but I like to have that so that there is no back and forth when I'm in backup and the first contract fails. We're on our way. I get both ways, so yeah.
Yep. I just have a hard time managing MEC pluses and TFC pluses. So I like to get the hard dates because it just makes it clearer for everybody.
Yeah, and if you are writing one of these with MEC and TFC especially, well, both of them, I guess that would be a case where you'd want to check that box where the dates do move to the next business day.
Yes,
I don't do that.
you do.
But,
You
yeah.
do. And that's Kevin preaches. I mean, that's what Kevin prefers
know.
us to do, is that it should be will. But I know you and I were taught differently.
Yeah, I like.
I
to know
converted.
the actual date.
I converted to Kevin's way on that. I decided it wasn't worth arguing with him in every single contracts class, so I just caved. Okay,
All right.
the next clause, broker is the buyer. This is when you are buying a property with your name on it. Buyer is a licensed real estate broker in the state of Colorado. Buyer may receive a portion of the commission and may be purchasing the property in anticipation of a future profit. Now, I was helping someone, actually the next one, broker is the seller. Seller is a licensed real estate broker in the state of Colorado. This is if you're selling your own property or something that you're associated with through an LLC. You can use these clauses from Damien when you have a seller who lives in California. You have to disclose that they're a licensed real estate broker somewhere. So use the clause, change Colorado to California or New Hampshire, or whatever you're doing, but use these clauses. Just because they have them written this way doesn't mean you can't use them for inspiration and make tweaks to them. I do it all the time. Broom clean. Seller agrees to turn over the property at possession in a broom clean condition. Broom clean means the trash and personal property have been fully removed, bathrooms and kitchen are clean, carpets are vacuumed, and all hard surface floors are clean. Okay, pretty basic. I have seen other people convert this to professionally cleaned. And if you're going to do that, you need to define what you mean by that. We had an instance a couple of years ago where the buyer thought professionally cleaned meant that the windows were washed inside and out, that all of the carpets were steam cleaned, and that a professional cleaning company had gone in and basically cleaned every square inch of the property, including the back corner of the cabinet that nobody can get into because it was too high. If you're saying professionally clean, define what you mean. Okay, buyer broker commission paid by seller. This one is why we check what we do in the buyer agency agreement. On behalf of buyer, seller agrees to pay the name of the brokerage firm of the buyer. So for the buyer, it would be Keller Williams Avenues Realty LLC, a commission of a dollar amount at closing. Now, I change that to say a commission of 2.8% of the purchase price at closing, because that's what my buyer agency agreements say. So you need to make sure if you're finding a property where the seller is not offering your minimum from your buyer agency agreement, by checking the box, listing brokerage firm or seller may pay, buyer is obligated to pay, now allows you to put into the additional provisions that you get paid the full amount. If you have not checked that box, you don't get to do this. Kathy, you can't answer this question. Who is the contract to buy and sell between? Do you know, Serena? Okay, so the contract to buy and sell is between the buyer and the seller, right? So who gets the benefit of your commission? You can answer, Kathy. You do, as the agent. You're not party to the contract. However, because you have properly checked the buyer is obligated to pay in your buyer agency agreement, it is now to the benefit of your buyer for you to request your commission be paid in the contract to buy and sell. Make sense? Are you guys there? Or am I talking to myself?
Sorry,
am.
I'm entering a car wash.
I'm trying to take notes on my own screen, then I couldn't even find where you were at.
Okay, awesome. I was like, did they both leave me? They both have their cameras off, so I can't see them.
I'm here.
They already fell asleep. Okay. That's a big one, you guys. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I am starting to see sellers offering 2% to the buyer agents. Just saying. Know your value and protect your value. Buyer sale contingency kickout clause. Now, I'm going to be really honest. As a buyer's agent, I don't normally write this in my offers, but as a seller's agent, I use this as in a counter offer. You use a kickout clause when you get an offer or when you're writing an offer that has a sale contingency. So I'll read it and then let's going to talk about what it means. So buyer cannot qualify to purchase the property without selling buyer's property located at 123 Elm Street, aka buyer's property. Therefore, this contract is contingent upon the sale of buyer's property. Upon the earlier of seller providing written notice to buyer of seller's receipt of another acceptable offer on the property or a specific date, buyer will have X number of hours in which to send seller written notice that this contingency is waived. If buyer does send said written notice to seller waiving this contingency, this contract will remain in full force and effect, and buyer waives buyer's rights to terminate under loan objection deadline. We have to update that to availability. Buyer agrees that buyer's earnest money is forfeited if buyer fails to close on this contract due to buyer's property failing to close or because buyer fails to qualify for a loan to purchase the property. If buyer does not send said written notice to seller waiving this contingency, this contract will automatically terminate. So there's a lot to unpack in that paragraph. So this paragraph allows the seller to continue to accept offers on a property after they have accepted your buyer's offer that's contingent on the sale of a property. If the seller gets another offer that is better than yours, they can notify you, hey, we've got another offer. You've got until, if we wrote 24 hours and it was right now, we would say you have until 10:30 on April 19th to either remove the sale contingency. And if you don't remove the sale contingency, you're out. And I'll give you your earnest money and you're done. If the buyer says, okay, I'll remove the contingency, and then for whatever reason, the sale of their house falls apart and they can't get approved for the loan because they didn't sell their house, they lose their earnest money. So it's a very strategic thing on both sides, which is why a lot of people, a lot of sellers don't like to take contingent offers because they don't want to get into this. However, if I'm on the listing side and I don't have a lot of activity, it's not necessarily a bad thing to put in there. However, some buyers get very uncomfortable because now they may have started spending money on inspections. They've started spending money on appraisals, and they could get kicked out at any point in time if their house doesn't close. Kathy, have you ever had to kick anybody out really?
Nope,
Have you used this?
nope.
You've
I
never
haven't.
put it in a contract?
I have not worked with any contingent buyers, I don't believe.
What about
Sorry,
on
I'm
your
being
listings?
I've only accepted one, so I don't remember that one.
You don't see it a lot because in the market that we're in, the reality is the sellers will just accept an offer that's not contingent from somebody else because they're usually dealing in multiple offers.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I usually use the contingent offers to negotiate against the other offer.
Exactly. Me too, right? It's part of the strategies of multiple offers. If you don't have multiple offers, as a seller, you have to ask yourself, if I'm not getting a lot of activity, but everything, all the other terms are good, they may not put a kick-out clause in it, right? Because a buyer might not be willing to take this risk. So it's an interesting dance of when to use it, but I think it's very important to have it in your toolkit and understand it.
Yeah, I just had somebody present an offer. First, they sent over the lender letter, so I looked at that conventional, no restrictions. And when I got the offer, it was contingent. And the date of the contingency was the close date. So I think she just didn't know how to write an offer, but that told me enough to, you know.
Yep. It's fun.
Yes.
Fun. All right, buyer viewing contingency. So this one, I called it the COVID clause. However, there are instances where it might make sense to use it. So buyer entered into this contract prior to viewing the property. Therefore, this contract is contingent upon buyer viewing and approving the property in buyer's sole subjective discretion on or before the viewing objection deadline. If seller does not receive buyer's written notice to terminate due to buyer's disapproval of the property on or before the viewing objection deadline, buyer is deemed to have approved the property under this provision, and this contract will remain in full force and effect. This contingency is in addition to any other rights buyer has under the terms of this contract, including those rights under paragraph 10. And then if you're going to use this, you also have to make sure you put a viewing objection deadline up in your dates and deadlines in the contract. When do you use this? Boy, did we use this in early 2020 when real estate was non-essential and people couldn't go look at homes. So buyers we would market them really well, show them off, and a buyer would write an offer with this contingency in it that they had like 24 hours to go see it, because once they were under contract, a buyer could go inspect the property. So I sold 2 listings with these in there, and it actually was pretty easy, but everybody was having to do it back then. In our current environment, I mean, yes, you could use it as a buyer's agent. However, if I'm on the listing agent and multiple offers and your client hasn't seen it and the other ones have, probably not going to bode well for you, right? But maybe you've got a client who's out of town and you show them the property on FaceTime and then they want to see it, but offers are due tomorrow at 5 p.m. You might use it. I just don't know if it's the best strategy to use in the market that we're currently in today. But again, knowing it's there because the markets change on a dime. Okay, escalation clause. I'm starting to hear these again. An escalation clause, I call that the eBay clause. So you know when you go shopping on eBay and you bid on something and you say, but I will go up to a max price of X and just keep raising my bid by an increment of whatever it is. So basically what an escalation clause is. The purchase price will automatically be raised by whatever amount you're willing to beat the other higher offer as over the net purchase price offered by any higher bona fide arm's length offer upon buyer's receipt of a copy of the higher offer. Net purchase price means the purchase price offered by the bona fide purchaser less any and all concessions or other credits which reduce the proceeds received by the seller. However, buyer's purchase price will not exceed a dollar amount. Buyer may allocate the additional purchase price between new loan and cash at closing as directed by buyer's lender. Additionally, both buyer and seller agree to execute and amend extend with the new purchase price if but required by buyer's lender. I always do that, or I do it with a counteroffer. Once the buyer and seller are under contract, this clause terminates and is removed from the contract. So you're the buyer's agent. In your conversation with the listing agent prior to submitting your offer, you find out that you're competing, but they won't really tell you much. They won't give you dollars. And your buyer says, well, I want to buy the house, but you know, it's listed at $550 and yeah, I'd be willing to pay $575, but I don't want to pay $575 if I can get it for $550. And the listing agent says, yeah, I like escalation clauses, go for it. By the way, not all listing agents do. So your buyer says, okay, let's do this. Let's offer $555. And then let's tell them we'll beat any offer they have by $1,500, but I'm not going higher than $575. You'd put the $1,500 over in the first line where it'll be raised by the amount of $1,500 and will not exceed $575,000. Escalation clauses, again, everybody has their own opinion of them. One of my favorite questions to ask the listing agents are when I call them, what are you and your seller's thoughts on escalation clauses? Because if they hate them, I'm probably not going to include it in my offer. But if I have a buyer, seller, and the listing agent says, yeah, we like them, go for it, then I have the opportunity of getting my client the house at the best possible price and not risk them paying significantly more than they have to. Some people believe an escalation clause shows your hand. Well, you're willing to go to 575. And I one time had a listing agent when I was a new agent tell me, well, you know, Margaret, I could have just sent you a counter offer for the 575. I technically do not have to show you that higher offer. And he's really right. Go ahead, Kathy.
That's what I do. If somebody tells me they can pay and their lender has supported that, I'm countering at the max.
Mhm.
I just don't understand why I wouldn't, unless there's not heavy activity. But I'm not showing them anything, and I'm countering at their max if it's a typical spring counter, multiple offer situation.
Yep. So again, it's a clause you need to know about, right? Because it is a tool in your toolkit as a buyer's agent. And I will tell you, most listing agents are not like Kathy. Most listing agents and most sellers will go, okay, well, they said 1,500 and we have this one for 560. So I guess they're going to pay us 561, 500. That's what most listing agents and sellers do. So you just have to talk through with your buyer the risks and the rewards.
It also matters what sort of appraisal gap they have, because I have countered back at what I really believed the appraisal would come to, because I didn't have an appraisal gap, which is a smart thing if you're writing a escalation clause. I would only put the appraisal gap to where you think it should be, because it shows that you've done more work, maybe more work than they have. But yeah.
But you don't have to use them together, right? I mean, I've written offers with escalation clauses with no appraisal gap. I've done appraisal gaps with no escalation clauses. So it just really depends on all the different levers that you can pull as a buyer's agent. And don't forget, you can turn around and use an awful lot of these, not the escalation clause, but a lot of these in your counter offers. I mean, the same clauses work. Do we have you confused yet, Serena?
No, not necessarily. I got a lot of questions that are kind of popping up, but I'm like, I don't know if I feel like it's something I need to worry about just yet.
Well, so hit me with one.
So one of them would be, if you have the escalation clause and they did get an offer that was higher, then they would have to come to you, right, to see if you would accept that before they replied to the other offer, or how would that work?
So I've got an offer from Kathy at 560, and your buyer sent me an offer with an escalation clause of 1,500 and a max of 575. I would call you. I would, but most agents don't, but I would call you and say, hey, Serena, this is Margaret. Hey, my sellers absolutely love your offer. They are going to implement the escalation clause because we did have an offer at 560. So I am going to be sending you a counter offer at the 561, 500, which takes into account your $1,500, but stays under your max of 575.
And in that instance, you reject the other offer. So then what if during the whole process you get another offer that's higher? Like, when does that, is that determined by an escalation clause deadline, acceptance deadline?
Well, if I have sent you a counter at the 561, 500, because you and Kathy were the top two, okay? And then all of a sudden Stacy shows up and she gives me an offer at 570. If you have signed the counter at 561, 500, I'm under contract with you, and it doesn't matter that Stacy's came in.
Sure. Okay.
If, however, your buyer has not signed that counter offer, I can now call, notify you that I am retracting that counter offer. And because we got another offer at 570, so I'm willing to write you another counter at 571, 500, or I'm going to take the other offer.
Perfect, makes sense.
So when you're a buyer's agent and you get a counter offer in a hot market, your buyer needs to sign them fast.
Yeah, good to know.
Now, the other thing is that Stacy should have called me and let me know that she was sending an offer, and I should have done a better job communicating with her on the timelines of when the decisions were being made so that one didn't come in after we had gotten to that point.
Sure, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. As my friend KP would say, communication, 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 talk, 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 talk. Right? It's making sure people know what's going on so that you don't get into that, because that would become very contentious, what I just described. You would feel really horrible and your buyer would feel very slimy if I gave you a counter at 561, 500, then I retracted it and sent you one for $10,000 more.
Right, right.
That's the risk your buyer's taking, so you need to know how to advise them.
Yep.
If you've sent that offer, you've received a counter, sign it. Otherwise, it's not a done deal until both parties have signed. Yep.
And the other way around is that as the listing agent in that environment, you absolutely have to control your seller's level of anxiety. We had one where the seller, we knew the listing agent had a high degree of probability that another offer was coming in, but it wasn't coming in until 10 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
Seller was just super, 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 super anxious. So at 9:55, listing agent at the seller's instructions sent a counter offer to buyer number one. The new offer came in and they had to retract the counter offer, but the buyer that they sent the counter offer to dilly-dally. So in that case, I mean, they got it retracted and it got ugly. But at the end of the day, you always have to advise your client of the risk. Like if your seller is that anxious, I would hold them off as much as you possibly can. That's why it's really important to have those conversations early. Excuse me, Mr. Seller, we're going on the market this weekend. How do you want to handle offers? So my one this last weekend, good property, good activity, good everything. I could tell every single agent who called me, I am reviewing the offers with my seller at 5 o'clock on Monday. So everybody knew they had to get them in. So we didn't have any of those stragglers, right? So that communication is super, super, super important. Okay. All right. Extension for loan delay. If closing is delayed due to buyer's lender, the closing date and possession date may be extended by buyer for up to X number of days by written notice by buyer to seller no later than closing. I've never used this. I've never seen it. I think if I was using a lender that has a reputation of not getting things done on time, I might do this, put this in there early while you're still in the honeymoon stage, as Kevin calls it, especially in a market where, it locks it in. Because if I'm working with a lender who, for whatever reason, never seems to get things done on time, but that's who my client wanted to use, we get to the end, the seller might say, yeah, no, I don't care that you're not ready. Go ahead and terminate or go in default and I'll keep your earnest money. So if I put this in the contract, it may give me some extra days. Home warranty. Seller agrees to furnish a name of the company, home warranty at seller or buyer's expense at closing at a cost not to exceed X amount of dollars with a term of X number of years. And so we can use those exactly that, like the condo I've got hitting the market this weekend, we're putting up a home warranty right away. So you can put this into the contract to buy and sell that says we're having a home warranty. Also, as a buyer's agent, if you have a first-time home buyer and they're super nervous because appliances are old and HVAC is old, and this makes them feel better, you could absolutely put this in and you can dictate which home warranty company you want the seller to provide it for. Hi, Elizabeth. Home warranty waiver. Buyer has advised that home warranties may be available for purchase to insure the property. However, buyer has decided against purchasing a home warranty. I have never used that. I have no idea why I would put that in a contract to buy and sell. All right. Appraisal gap. Appraisal gaps can be written in so many different ways. And some of them are so badly written, and you really need to understand and take the time to know those way they're written and what the implications are, whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side. And make sure that the words match your intent. So appraisal gaps are just that. They predetermine what's going to happen in the event the appraisal comes in less than the agreed upon purchase price in the contract. So the first one is low appraisal, says buyer brings some cash and a price reduction. So this one says, in the event the appraisal states that the appraised value is less than the purchase price, buyer agrees that buyer will bring up to X amount of dollars of additional cash to closing to make up the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price. This is known as buyer contribution. Buyer represents that buyer has already confirmed with the buyer's lender that the buyer contribution will not adversely impact the buyer's loan. If the difference, this one's key, if the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price is greater than the buyer contribution, the purchase price will automatically reduce to the appraised value plus the buyer contribution. The parties agree to execute any amend, extend, or document required by the buyer's lender or closing company to document the change in the purchase price. So now we've got a warning from Damien. Okay. So what this says is, oops, I lost KP. What this says is that let's say that we offered $575 on that property, Serena, and we put in that for that appraisal gap, and let's say we put in $10,000. So what we're saying is, if the house appraises for $565 or more, I'm going to pay $575 because I'll bring that extra $10,000 to closing. But it also says, in the event the house appraises for $550, Mr. Seller, I'll still bring my $10,000. So $550 plus my 10 becomes $560. You automatically reduce your purchase price to $560. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great for the buyer. But what happens if it's on the seller side? If you have one that's written like this, the risk is, what if you have an appraiser that just straight up blows it? Right? And they appraise that house at $525. And everybody in their right mind knows that that house should be closer to $550 to $575, somewhere in that range. All of a sudden, if you've written that clause that way, for the buyer, $525 plus 10, that makes the new purchase price automatically $535. But from a seller's perspective, that ain't no good.
What about if, I mean, doesn't that also play a part into the appraisal objection deadline? And which one would, what would override that?
Well, if you've got that clause in there, I don't know that your appraisal objection does you any good, because you've already agreed to drop the price. I'd probably still let the listing agent know, hey, the price came in and we're going to implement this clause, because the listing agent, seller, and probably you, the buyer's agent, if they really appraised it at $525, want to put your heads together and ask for a relook on that appraisal. Because no one's going to feel good about it if you implement it that one. Okay.
Right.
And by the way, that's not the one that we currently see in our current market. All right, second one, low appraisal, buyer price reduction. In the event the appraisal states that the appraised value is less than the purchase price, upon seller's receipt of a copy of such appraisal or lender verification, the purchase price will automatically be reduced to the appraised value so long as the purchase price is not less than X, minimum appraised value. The parties agree to execute any amend, extend, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So this one says, we're under contract at $575. The appraisal comes in at $560. property automatically becomes 560. As long as in this contract, in this part, we put that we would not less than. So let's say that in the offer, we said purchase price is 575, appraised value has to be at least 550. Let's just pretend. So when the property appraises at 560, this clause implements that the price automatically drops to 560. But by putting in the minimum of the purchase price, it protects the seller from the appraiser who totally blows it and does 525. See how they're different? Automatically drops the purchase price, no additional money from the buyer. Again, it tells you what's going to happen in the event of a low appraisal. Okay, the last one is the most common one that we see in our current world. In the event the appraisal states that the appraised value is less than the purchase price, buyer agrees that buyer will bring up to $10,000 to stay consistent of additional cash to closing to make up the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price buyer contribution. Buyer represents that buyer has already confirmed with the buyer's lender that the buyer contribution will not adversely impact the buyer's loan. If the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price is greater than the buyer contribution, this paragraph does not apply and each party will have those rights specified in paragraph 6.2 or otherwise in the contract. So what this one says is that I'm willing to pay up to $10,000 more than the appraised value. So 575, the house appraises at 565 or more, I'm going to pay you the 575. However, if the house appraises for 555, we get to renegotiate. So it's not an automatic anything. Buyer and seller negotiate what to do in that environment. This is the most common one right now, and I would say in our current market, the fairest to both parties. When you get into that environment where you're writing appraisal gap coverages, you definitely want help from your coach or Bob or Charles, okay?
Definitely.
Definitely. That's probably the number one thing I fix when I'm doing contract reviews on the weekend. All right. Proposed inspection resolution deadline. I have no idea why this is here. Seller agrees to provide buyer with seller's proposed inspection resolution on or before the proposed inspection resolution deadline. We already have an inspection resolution deadline in the contract, so I don't know why we need it. Okay. Seller replacement home. Let's pretend that we have a seller who has to sell their home to buy a new home, but they haven't found it yet. And they're super nervous about it. And they want a clause that protects them that says, if I don't find my new home and am I not under contract by a certain time, I want to be able to not sell my house to this buyer. So this clause can be used in that environment. So this is one place that gives the seller the right to terminate a contract. This contract is contingent upon seller closing on the purchase of a replacement home acceptable to seller on or before a date. And that becomes known as the conditional purchase deadline. Seller has the right to terminate effective upon buyer's receipt of seller's notice to terminate on or before conditional purchase deadline if such property is not purchased and closed by such deadline. If buyer does not receive seller's notice to terminate on or before conditional purchase deadline, seller waives any right to terminate under this provision. Seller's broker is authorized and instructed to advise buyer as to status on seller's purchase of the replacement home. We don't use this a lot because you write a 30 to 45 day close and put a 60-day post-closing occupancy agreement. Unless your seller is looking for something super specific, we're going to find them a home. But again, if you have that super nervous client, you can absolutely ask the buyer's agents to put this in their offers, or you can put it in their counters. And it just says, if the seller does not purchase or find a home by a certain date, they can terminate the contract. Now, the buyers are probably going to go, well, then I'm not going to spend $700 on an inspection and another $700 or $800 on an appraisal till I know we're going through. So again, it's just knowing that it's there and knowing when to use it and when not to use it. Septic system. This is the clause that Damien gives us. I'm just going to say this. Kevin has given us clauses to use as it relates to the septic systems. And there's a different version for buyer and a different version for seller. If you are working with septic, especially if most of us are down here in the city, call Bob, call Margaret, call Kevin, call somebody who knows how to deal with these, and we will give you the right clauses. Basically, with a septic system, every county has their own rules around what has to be done in order to get a use permit, which is required at the time that we transfer property. Typically, septic charges and responsibility for cleaning, inspecting, verify it's working in proper working order falls typically on the seller's hands right now, seller's shoulders. So just reach out to us and let us help you with that. The way he has this written is not how Kevin wants us to do it. Okay. A short sale release, you're going to use this in the event that you have a short sale. Very uncommon, but it just says this contract is contingent upon seller receiving a release from liability from the lien holder or lien holders for any deficiency on the liens against the property. And then SSA, again, remember we had TFC for termination of first contract. Well, SSA means short sale acceptance. So if you're getting it, again, if you're getting into a short sale, reach out to people who've been there, done that, so that we can help you. For the well typically in our current environment, it's customary, I don't want to use that word. It's customary in our current environment that well testing is falling on the buyer's responsibility, and they do it as part of the inspection due diligence phase. That being said, if you want the seller to take on the well, this would be what you would use. At least 3 days prior to the inspection objection deadline, seller at seller's sole expense shall provide buyer with the following: copy of the well permit, completion report, and statement of beneficial use on the groundwater well of the property as issued by the Colorado Division of Water, and a bacteriological water test report conducted on the groundwater well completed within the last X number of days and produced by the County Department of Health or a reputable private contractor acceptable to buyer. We don't use this one because right now those tests fall on the shoulders of the buyer. Okay. Whew, those are all the ones with the contract to buy and sell, and they took us an hour. Is your head spinning yet?
A little, in a good way, though.
You know, here's the good thing, right? I always tell people, right? If you feel like you're drinking from the fire hose or your head is spinning when you're taking a class where you've never done it before, it means you're at least understanding a little bit of what we're saying. And the whole thing is you're taking great notes. And when you get in this place where you'll go, I remember there's I got to go to that clause notes, right? Or I need to call Margaret, or I need to call Bob, right? It's, you know, it helps you remember things, right? You've at least been exposed to them.
Right, exactly.
So closing instructions, this is a clause that you can put in your closing instructions. It just says, in the event the transaction between buyer and seller fails to close, and the parties have not made competing claims to the earnest money deposit and have not mutually authorized in writing the closing company to disperse the funds, then the earnest money deposit will be dispersed as instructed by seller's brokerage firm. I think they changed the closing instructions, so it already says that. Okay. Emails. This is probably, I didn't even know these were out there until I started teaching this class. But sometimes when we're writing emails, it's really hard to know what to say in certain circumstances. And there's a lot of reasons why we want to sometimes just cover our own backsides, right? And make sure that even though we've communicated by phone. I'm not going to go through all of these because I just don't think it's relative, but I want you to know they're there. So this one says, you have a casualty prior to the closing and you're the buyer. We live in a part of the country that hailstorms are pretty prevalent. That if I think back to 2017, that last hailstorm that came through here that destroyed my favorite car of all time, you know, property got damaged. So this would be an email that you would write to your buyer if you're the buyer's agent that says, due to the recent severe weather, the property you're purchasing may have sustained damage. As a such, we should do. I recommend you do. Okay. If you are a listing agent, as you're aware, there was severe weather in the area. As such, the buyer is concerned. Therefore, we need to have it checked. Right? And we can get a roof inspector to come out or a siding instructor or whatever we need. If you have casualty And we want to tell the seller, you need to call your insurance adjuster. Okay, so depending on your circumstances, at least he's given us a template to start the conversation with our clients. Okay. Multiple offers. This is fun. There's nothing better than writing this. You get to send this out to every agent who's shown the property. My seller's in receipt of more than one offer for the property located at X. We're giving you one last chance to submit highest and best. Okay. Property disclosure. This is how to explain to the seller how to fill out the property disclosure. Okay. Survey advisory. You have the right to get an ILC. I would send this email to every single buyer that's not on a townhome or a condo, because I don't ever want them to come back and tell me I told them not to do it. Right? So the first one is about the objection. The second one is about ordering it. While you're not required to order, it can be an important document when purchasing properties that may disclose issues within the boundaries that are not visible. Let me know if you need a referral. I'm letting them know you have this deadline. It's up to you if you want to implement it or not. Same way with a home inspection, right? They don't have to do it, but they all do it because they know it's a good idea. I believe ILCs are a good idea too. Title advisory. I understand you've recently received it, and it tells you what to do, because guess what? I'm not a title expert. I know how to read them, and I've been around title commitments since 1983. So I can pretty much go, oh, something's wonky here, but I'm not an expert. So this kind of helps them go over, you received this, here's what it means. And if you have questions, reach out to the title company. Okay. Oh, all right. How are we doing? Holding up?
I am just taking notes over here.
Awesome. All right. Well, the nice part is it took us an hour to get through basically one contract, but the rest of them, they go pretty fast. And the beauty of it is there's a lot of duplication in the exclusive right to buy and exclusive right to sell.
Perfect.
So, additional commission waiver. Pursuant to 731, the buyer is obligated to pay any portion of the success fee not paid by the listing brokerage firm or seller. However, in the event broker does not advise buyer in writing prior to the buyer submitting an offer on the property for which the listing broker or seller will not be paying the entire success fee, brokerage firm waives its right to collect any additional commission pursuant to 731 on that specific transaction. Here's what that means. Mr. Buyer, my buyer agency says that my minimum commission is 2.8%. And as you know, not all sellers are offering 2.8%, right? Some are doing 2.5, starting to see some 2s, which blows my mind. And so one of the things I always tell my buyers is, look, if there is a property that, and they're concerned about that 2.8 minimum, I will say, look, if there's a property that's not paying my minimum, I will tell you before we go look at it. And then you get to choose. And I'll do everything I can to negotiate the full 2.8 in the offers if we decide to write one. But if I don't tell you that that one's not paying me my full one, then I'm not going to come after you. This is what that says. It just is that I have to tell them in writing that, hey, property 123 Beach Street is only offering a 2.3% commission to buyer's agents. And as you'll remember, our agreement is a minimum of 2.8. So it's just a way in writing. It's twofold. One, it's letting the buyer know I'm not trying to go out there and showing properties just to get more money from him. At the same time, I'm maintaining my value, but I'm also going to let him know when we're going into that situation. Lease option. My answer is don't do it. Some sellers and buyers ask about lease purchase or lease option transactions. These transactions are much more complicated than an ordinary real estate transaction. Payment to the seller is deferred. Closing is usually long after contract signing. Conveyance of title to buyer is deferred, and each transaction has its own challenges. The state of Colorado does not endorse forms or condone brokers drafting lease purchase or lease option contracts. In the event the buyer does decide to enter into a lease purchase or lease option contract, buyer agrees to retain a Colorado licensed attorney to represent buyer and to draft the appropriate paperwork. If buyer insists on moving forward with a lease purchase or lease option contract and is not represented by an attorney, then this buyer listing contract terminates and the brokerage firm is entitled to a termination fee of a flat dollar amount due within 3 days of brokerage firms giving notice of such termination. This is for those buyers who just insist on wanting to look at homes that are, rent to buys and that type of stuff. I would just stay away from them, but in the event you found one, this is what you would put in there. Rebate to buyer. Broker agrees to rebate X amount of money of the success fee to provided buyer. Determined on 1, the entire success fee is being paid by the seller or the listing brokerage firm, and 2, buyer's rebate is fully disclosed to buyer's lender and is on the settlement statements and or closing disclosure at closing. So we absolutely can do a rebate of our commission to our buyers. We just have to make sure that it doesn't exceed the amount of their closing costs. So if you were going to give them $1,000 or $1,500 at closing, you absolutely can do that as long as it doesn't fall within the office 2% minimum, and that it's fully disclosed up front. Okay. Again, not something we use very often. Referral fee. Brokerage firm agrees to pay a referral fee of X% of the success fee received by the brokerage firm to the referring brokerage firm for the benefit of referring the broker's name, providing referring brokerage firms and referring brokers real estate licenses are in good standing with the state in which the referring brokerage firm and referring broker are licensed to do business. Holy moly. That's a lot. Most of us just use the referral form and call it good. Team clause, you're not on a team, so we don't care. Termination. The buyer listing contract between the buyer, the broker, and the brokerage firm is terminated effective immediately. Brokerage firm and broker hereby waive any and all right to commissions or fees from buyer. Buyer releases broker and brokerage firm from any and all responsibility, obligations, and claims relating to the buyer listing contract. This would not go in the initial exclusive right to buy, but this would absolutely go into the amendment to the listing contract in the event that you are terminating the contract with the buyer. You're firing them or they're firing you. This is what you would put in that amend. Transaction coordinator authorization. We do have 2 transaction coordinators in our office. Transaction coordinators is a great leverage from an administrative perspective in which they can take care of an awful lot of the paperwork, and the beauty of it is you don't pay them until you close, and they're usually very inexpensive, usually under $500. Buyer understands that the name of the coordinator and then parentheses coordinator is an unlicensed assistant and will be helping broker throughout this transaction. Buyer authorizes coordinator to receive buyer's personal information. The broker is solely responsible for paying the coordinator. Now, one of our 2 is a licensed assistant. So if they have a real estate license, you would change unlicensed to licensed. But you want to make sure that your buyer, and then there's another one of these for sellers, is aware that you're using a TC. Inspection. This is a clause that you would use in the inspection. Well, there's a couple different things. The first one I like, credit for inspection items. In lieu of inspection items, buyer will receive dollar amount of seller concessions at closing. So you would use that either in an inspection objection or an inspection resolution, where the seller is not going to make repairs, but they're just going to give money. So you would use that clause. Inspection waiver. Buyer understands that the buyer has the right to inspect the property prior to the inspection objection deadline or the terms of the contract. However, buyer has decided against having the property inspected. You could put that in an email. You could put that in a lot of different places. I've never used it. I just let the deadline go by. The repair of inspection items. While this is very well written, I will tell you it's written by an attorney, and it can definitely alienate the other side. So I don't use this. I don't think any of us use this clause just because it comes across nasty. Questions?
No,
right.
none right now.
All right, now we got through the buyer one and we did that in like 10 minutes. Actually, we got through inspections too. So here we go. Listing agreement. So if you have a client who is doing a 1031 exchange because they're selling an investment property, in your listing agreement, you might put this in here. The property is an investment property for seller. Therefore, seller is advised to research doing a 1031 exchange with competent legal and or tax counsel prior to entering into a purchase contract for the property. Seller is also advised to seek guidance from a qualified 1031 intermediary. I got it right that time. I can never say that word. So if you're using, if your seller is selling this with a 1031, you would want to put that in there. Okay, exclusion to listing. It is agreed that in the event seller accepts a written contract for the sale and purchase of the property from someone's name and notifies broker in writing on or before a date, neither the broker nor the brokerage firm shall be entitled to any sale commission on said sale. Seller will submit a copy of the executed contract to the broker as evidence of said contract. Furthermore, broker's duties under the seller listing contract will be suspended until which such time as the contract closes, terminates, or is canceled. Upon termination or cancellation, the broker will resume broker's duties under the seller listing contract. You would use that one when, well, I would really like to sell my property, but my niece, Hannah, her and her husband have really indicated that they want to buy the property. And so, if they want to buy the property, I'd rather just do it with them directly and not have an agent. So you could put this into your listing contract and you can say it is agreed that the seller, Hannah, and notifies broker in writing on or before a certain date, and then basically you terminate your listing contract. Because the likelihood is Hannah's going to buy the property is less than 10%. Doesn't happen very often, but most of these things don't, right? Lease purchase, basically this is the same words that it said in the buyer version, except it's just for the seller. That if the seller agrees to accept someone to do that, that does a lease option, then they need to get a real estate attorney involved. O&E and TBD reimbursement. An O&E is $5. So I probably would not request a reimbursement on that. Although a TBD title commitment, this is something where you actually order from your title company what they call a TBD, which means I don't have a contract, I don't have a buyer, but I want you to do the work as if you were preparing a full title commitment. I've only done that once, and I did it when I sold my uncle's property. It was acreage up out of Idaho Springs. There were old mines on the property. There were a whole lot of not encumbrances, but easements and all kinds of other things up there. And we really wanted to understand what we were dealing with. And we knew that doing that title search in the mountains was going to take longer than a normal 30-day contract. So I had Land Title start the title commitment when we went under contract to list his house, so that all the research was done. In the event that you never close, the title company still wants to be paid for that work. So what this says is seller authorizes broker to order a TBD title commitment for the benefit of the seller, so long as the fee for said TBD title commitment does not exceed X amount of money. Seller agrees to reimburse broker the cost of the TBD within 3 days. I was ready to eat that cost, right? But you could ask your client to reimburse you if you found it. You could also alter that if you wanted to get reimbursement for marketing and stuff like that. You could alter that a little bit and get the same verbiage in. Photography, video rights. Seller has no rights to use or reproduce any materials, including all photographs, renderings, images, videos, or other creative items supplied by broker to market the property. Rebate to seller. We like to, as agents, give away our money. I see it all the time. And one of the common ways is that if we have someone who is selling their house with us and they're buying with us, we want to give them a discount on the sale of their property. But the problem is if you just discount your commission right up front, what happens if they never purchase a property with you? That 2.5 or 2.8 or 3% that you thought you were going to get on the purchase of a property, guess what? If they never buy, you didn't get it, and you reduced your cost up front on the sale that happened. So how do you protect yourself? Well, one of the ways to successfully protect yourself is to do a rebate to seller that is dependent on them closing on both properties. So seller is entitled to a rebate of, and you can do a flat fee or you can do a percent of the sale commission provided seller closes on another home within 6 months from the date of closing on the sale of the property, and brokerage firm earns a commission on the new home of at least X. And provided seller's lender approves said rebate. The rebate will be deducted from the brokerage firm's commission on the purchase of the new home and will be reflected as a credit to seller on the settlement statement for the purchase of the new home. Such credit may be reflected on the settlement statements as a credit from the new home seller after brokerage firm agrees to take a lesser commission. This is always smart to do the rebate usually, because normally when someone's selling a home, is that typically more expensive or less expensive than the home they're buying?
I'd say less, typically.
So give your percentage, right? So, give your, whatever you're doing, 20 point, a 1/4%, a 0.5%, The other thing is you could also do a flat fee. You could say, I agree to give you a rebate of, depending on what the numbers look like, right? You could say, I agree to give you a flat rebate of $2,500. The general consumer gets more excited about a true dollar amount than a percent. A percent means nothing, right? I'm going to give you a 1/4% discount. I'm going to give you a 1/4% of my commission rebate. And you go, big deal, it's a 1/4%. Well, if I do the math, maybe it's $4,000. Serena, I'll give you $4,000 rebate. Which sounds better to you?
Right.
And sometimes it saves you, the broker, money, right? So again, if you get in that situation where you're talking about doing rebates with somebody who's buying and selling, let us help you through that and help you write this.
Okay.
Okay. Referral fee, that sounds familiar. We talked about that under the exclusive right to buy. A short sale coordinator, this is, again, it's basically the same clause as the TC, except when you are listing a short sale, you usually need a short sale coordinator. So that talks about that. The team clause is the same as the one that's in the other one. Termination, the seller listing contract between the seller, the broker, and the brokerage firm is terminated effective immediately. Brokerage firm and broker hereby waive any and all rights to commission or fees from seller. Seller understands that seller may owe a buyer broker's commission and that neither the broker nor the brokerage firm owes anything to the buyer, buyer's broker, or seller. Seller agrees to indemnify and hold harmless brokerage firm and broker against all and any claims by buyer or buyer's broker against brokerage firm or broker for payment of a buyer's broker commission. Seller also releases broker and brokerage firm from any and all responsibility, obligations, and claims relating to the seller listing contract or the sale of the property. Basically, this one just sounds messy, right? And if you are terminating a contract with a seller and there was potentially a buyer's broker involved, you got a big mess and you need to get Bob involved, and he's probably going to pull in our office attorney. So I would say if you get into this situation, before you just use this clause, talk to Bob, talk to Margaret, let us help you, okay? Transaction coordinator, it's actually the same, except it just changes buyer from seller. Video, seller authorizes broker to video the property both inside and out. Seller is strongly encouraged to remove any items like family photos, jewelry, antiques, etc. Seller does not want appearing in said video. Broker will notify seller at least 24 hours prior to recording. The good news with that one is they rewrote the exclusive right to sell. And so that's kind of also in there as well. And we got to the end of this.
Woohoo.
Woo! Here we go.
Great. That was
How were your
good.
notes?
Good. I was able to insert comments and just add what I had to say so I didn't mess it up. But yeah, that's going to be useful, I'm sure, at some point.
Awesome.